Hello YouTube, 2022 is here. So I decided to do a little bit of a 2021 TCG awards kind of thing. Now, there's probably some categories I've missed and a lot of stuff that I probably didn't cover properly. If you have any argumentative stuff in the comments, please be respectful, but you guys can drop them in the comments below. But this is what I kind of figured would be a good year recap. I omitted any creators specifically or like people specifically because I don't want people to feel left out. And I omitted anything specific related to competitive tournaments, like on the grand scale, just because I don't think we really did anything besides Players Cup and team challenges, I guess. So this is kind of about the 4 sets we got this year and kind of the 4 formats we really had this year. So if you enjoy the content, obviously like, subscribe. I'm going to be trying to do expanded videos on my days off, on my Tuesdays and Thursdays, to try to pump out more TCG content because I want Pokemon to grow, especially with live hopefully on the horizon. So thank you guys all for watching. Let's jump into this year's 2021 Pokemon TCG Awards. Now, the first thing I felt like would be the best thing to kick it off with is Mewtwo. So Mewtwo and Mew Tag Team is a really cool card with the ability Perfection, and it was one of my favorite cards in recent history. And there was a lot of ways to play it. You could play it with Welder, which was one of my favorite ways. I won't lie to you guys. Welder Mewtwo was really cool. It won the last World Championships. Rillaboom Mewtwo, which is something that really took everyone by surprise. Not a deck that I thought would really be very popular, but it popped up and did really well. The Galaxy Ultimate Mewtwo, that was kind of your psychic box, playing Auroras, Rainbows, that kind of stuff. Kind of used the Solgaleo GX attack early and then kind of pivoted to a different style of build after rotation. Or not after rotation, but kind of pivoted to a different style of build. The Water Stoice Mewtwo with the Starmie GX, as well as the Blastoise GX to shuffle a bunch of energies back in. Some builds played like Frostmoth and other stuff. I don't know. It was a very interesting deck. I never really liked that one. Pika Mewtwo, which was basically just Pikarom, but you played Mewtwo in it because the format kind of demanded you need Mewtwo at a certain point because Urshifu was so popular and it was your only chance to win that matchup. Weavile Dark Box, which was the whole incident with like the turn 1 Bryson Balalba using the tag call engines, going red and blue turn 2 into a Dark Moon GX, Dark Call GX, whatever it is. Turn 2, turn 3, using cards like Galarian Moltres. That was a really, really fun variant. And then Urshi 2, which was a little bit of a hybrid of just taking 2 very, very good cards, putting them into a deck and saying, hey, I can use special energies just as well as the next guy. So we'll see what that is. And the winner of this one, obviously, Mewtwo. I'm starting it off with a fun one because I like Mewtwo a lot, and Mewtwo is like one of my favorite archetypes. So you guys can let me know in the comments what you think is the best one here. But I really liked the Dark Box variant. I think that was the coolest version to me. I think Dark Box, using the Shadow Connection, as well as all the options you had with the tag teams to use, the GXs to use, like Hoopa GX, got to see some play in that deck. You got to use Galarian Moltres very well. The combo potential was really cool. When everything worked as a whole with the Weavile and the Silvaldi and the red and blue engine, it really felt super, super cool to play and super, super cool to watch. The only shame was we didn't get Bryson and Balalba Man, the new one, until like a week before it kind of rotated. But if we had gotten that card, I think this deck would have seen a little more play. Watching it in action was one of the coolest things. And watching all the pieces move and the amount of plays, the different win conditions, the different ways to just like play the deck was really, really cool. And I really liked this deck a lot. This was my favorite Mewtwo variant. And that's hard because I think Welder was the one that I was like a ride or die for a very long time. And it was very close towards the end. Like the Welder Aurora build is a very close second to me. Now, the next thing is the best deck of 2021. If you guys didn't remember, we did have a rotation halfway through. And since then, there's a couple decks that have been dominating. I put the 5 decks that I think best encompassed this year. ADP Zacian was the deck that kind of was the terror, the deck that everyone was to beat, until rotation, realistically. Like, ADP in every capacity, shape, form was kind of dominating the format. Pikarom was the, runner-up. It always found ways to survive, either using Mewtwo, Crushing Hammers, some form of it. It was the deck that never, ever died. That's why Pikarom was always on the map. It turned its VMAX from its release, was very, very dominant until rotation happened, when Path to the Peak and all these cards got introduced that really kind of stifled it. But Eternatus was so strong early because you had the one-shot potential on these big tag teams that no other deck really had. And because of that and the lack of return back on you and your ability to use cards like Power Plant that other decks couldn't have used, you were a very strong deck. So Eternatus, I'm putting it up here. I know a lot of people might disagree with me on this, but I think Eternatus for the first half of this year until rotation was a very, very strong deck. And it really encompassed the pre-rotation meta where like we saw the first stages of VMAXs. Now, Urshifu Inteleon was a deck that was introduced. I'm gonna like blanket that into just Urshifu as a general statement. But Urshifu Inteleon / like Urshifu, as soon as it came into the metagame, it was one of the most impactful decks. It was causing everyone to play a little bit differently. Mew was being slotted into decks. Even ADP was giving ADP a run for its money. Pikarom instantly dropped a couple of slots. Eternatus also got put into place as well. It really was one of those decks that put everything into check so quickly. So it was a really cool deck to have. And then obviously Mew VMAX, which I don't need to give it more of a precursor. It's been dominating since its release. Yes, I know it's only been 2 months, but like this deck's nuts. Like, yeah. But anyway, without further ado, the winner here is ADP Zacian. I think ADP and ADP Zacian, or ADP in any capacity, has just been so dominant, so polarizing in the metagame that people were complaining about it. People wanted it banned. It didn't need to be banned. But since its release, since the day it came out, Altered Creation GX was just a GX attack that fundamentally broke the rules of the game by giving you 30 more damage and an extra prize card, which really made it so all your support Pokemon were now tag team Pokemon in terms of giving up prizes. So Arceus, Dialga, Palkia didn't have to do much besides Altered Creation into boss, and the game was over. And that sense of inevitability, that sense of dread, was just something that no other deck could really do. Everything else on this list is insane in its own respectful right. Pikarom was the underdog that scrapped. Eternatus was the big guy that did a lot of damage. Urshifu got to play whatever it wanted to do, and in the way it wanted to play. And Mew was a deck that is just dominant in its own right, but nothing was as scary as playing against ADP. That sense of inevitability, the moment you lost the coin flip, it was already like, oh man, this is going to be rough. Like, it was a scary deck. It was just that deck that no one wanted to play against. That's why I think it's the best deck of the year. Now, we had 6 sets. I'm including these mini sets in there as well, but I think we should talk about what the most impactful set on release, what it did to the metagame, etc. Shining Fates was a mini set. It didn't really have anything about a lot of reprints, nothing crazy. I think Shining Fates is probably at the bottom along with Celebrations. I think both those sets didn't really offer anything to the metagame. They gave us like 1 or 2 maybe niche cards to kind of try out, kind of tech into stuff, but they didn't do anything. And then we had Battle Styles, and I think Battle Styles is a very good set. I think Battle Styles introduced both rapid and single strike mechanics, which have been kind of the fundamental building blocks of the next couple sets, and it's been not a really great collector set, but a really good player set in terms of what it had to offer, kind of showing the direction the game is moving in, and that was really cool. Now, Chilling Reign introduced 2 more big beaters in the form of the horses, Shadow and Ice Rider, as well as giving us a chance to get a couple of cool cards like Inteleon, a couple of niche supporters that are seeing a little more play now, and a couple of item cards that kind of hinder your opponents. And it gave us Path to the Peak, most importantly, which really was an insane card. Like, that might be one of like the cards of the year kind of deal. So Chilling Reign was that, and then Evolving Skies gave us a couple of attackers, new attackers: Leafeon, Jolteon, Umbreon. Beefing up a couple of decks. Vaporeon is a potential attacker as well. A couple of really cool supporter cards as well. Raihan, all these niche cards. Evolving Skies was a kit and caboodle of attackers, but also a kit and caboodle of a lot of garbage. And now Fusion Strike, 99% of the set is garbage, but Mew VMAX, Genesect, and that archetype just coming out of Fusion Strike makes that set so impactful as well. So all 4 of our sets, our main sets, were very strong, but I think the winner has to go to Battle Styles every single time, because I think Battle Styles gave us a building block for the future. Battle Styles has given us 2 major archetypes, Single Strike and Rapid Strike, that all the other future sets have been building on. Evolving Skies gave us Umbreon, yes, but that's slotted into a Single Strike style deck. Fusion Strike gave us Gengar, that's slotted into Single Strike style decks. We got Melanie and Chilling Reign, that's now made its way into Urshifu. Like, all of these cards are becoming building blocks for our Urshifu style decks, our Single and Rapid Strike style decks. So Battle Styles was the most impactful set in my opinion. A close second is Chilling Reign because of Path to the Peak and Melanie specifically. And I guess the Shadow Rider and Ice Rider, but I don't think those were as crazy as people made them out to be. So that's our winner. Battle Styles is a very impactful set. If you're a collector, I know Battle Styles has been not a good set to invest in, but for a player, it's been fantastic. Now, biggest surprise decks. Now, I kind of want to think about these decks as decks that I don't typically think people expected to do well. People expected to kind of jump into their own limelight. Decks that people didn't really expect to exist is how I'd put it. Mewtwo Rillaboom is, I think, the prime example of a deck that was a shock to everybody. Kind of yes, Mewtwo was being played in every capacity, but no one really thought about Rillaboom as like a real deck. Especially myself. I kind of discounted it for a very long time. And it started rising to the forefront of the format. It started becoming one of the best decks in the game, and that was really crazy to me. Duraludon, recently played by Grant Manley, a couple of other people online. It also came out of nowhere. Now this format's been really heavily based on special energy. Zacian Zamazenta has been around for a little bit, and slotting in this Duraludon, playing a lot of these disruption cards, kind of forcing your opponents to play at your own pace. If they're playing special energy, you're really slowing them down, and you're doing a ton of damage and healing a ton at the same time. Was a deck that came out of nowhere. Now, Colossal is a deck that I put in here because it's a deck that nobody really expected to do well. It didn't really do well, but it was a pretty big surprise for like the 2 or 3 weeks that it did really well. But after that, it kind of petered off because people learned how to play against it. People realized it wasn't as great, but it was a really big surprise. I didn't think Colossal would be a good card in any capacity, and it did well. Now, Catterday is also a deck that I didn't expect to be good. A couple people were diehard on it, and I think a couple people towards the end of its lifestyle were very dead set on it being very, very good. And the fifth and final surprise deck for me is Urshifu Melanie. Now, we all knew that Melanie could kind of go on to any V Pokemon, and Urshifu was one of the best cards in the format, and Tord Reklev, one of the best players in the game, decided to put those two things together, and he made this really, really cool list that everyone started adopting and working with, and it made getting rapid flows off really, really easy. Everyone was going with the Raihan builds. People were doing stuff with Galarian Moltres, myself included. And the Melanie version got kind of overlooked. And as soon as we added Melanie to the deck, it started becoming one of the best decks in the format, even to today. And I think that was one of the biggest surprises as well. So with that being said, the biggest surprise was Urshifu Melanie as the best, most improved deck. The close second is obviously Mewtwo Rillaboom, in my opinion. The other three decks are kind of meh. I don't really remember what else did surprised people throughout the year, because I felt like the format developed so quickly due to these online events and open lists that things took a little bit, maybe a week to kind of develop, but nothing was that crazy. I think one of the other ones that kind of developed a little bit into the meta was Leafeon, but I think Leafeon's also very mid still compared to some of these decks. Yes, no, I'm not saying Catterday is better than it, but I think Leafeon it was a little bit more of an obvious synergistic choice than Catterday being put together. Now, biggest flop. I kind of described this as the hype around it versus what it actually accomplished in its immediate release, in the first month of release kind of deal. Rayquaza VMAX was a card that a lot of people really hyped for, especially because we already had the Flaffy engine. It really made a lot of sense to put the whole kit, the kit together, and it didn't do anything. And it's still not doing anything. Rayquaza was so overpriced, overhyped on day of release. It did not do anything. And following up, Gengar VMAX was a very similar story, where everyone was like, oh, Gengar just slots into single strike really easily. Gengar has the type advantage into Mew. Gengar is just blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, Gengar was tanking. Gengar has not been winning stuff. Gengar does well here and there if you hit the right matchups, but overall, the deck has been very mediocre. It's been not as hype as people thought it would be. Single Strike is another archetype. I'm saying Single Strike pre-Umbreon, because when Rapid and Single and Battle Styles came out, a lot of people put investments into both Single and Rapid Strike, and Single Strike was... everyone was like, oh, this is the underrated blah blah blah, it's the contender with a Rapid Strike. You can do a lot of this stuff. You can have Urshifu do a ton of damage. You have I don't even remember what other people, the backup attackers were in that deck in the first variant, but the deck was very streamlined, and people were putting a lot of stock into it, and it flopped. It went face first. Another deck was Blaziken VMAX paired with Zeraora or Sylveon or Urshifu. A lot of people thought Blaziken was going to be really good, or at least above average, and I think Blaziken really fell flat on its face. We have really seen it kind of peter out of the meta. It hasn't really made a splash. It was played in a couple of Sylveon decks, but even then it was a 1-1 or a 2-2 line kind of just used to kind of deal with Zacians or something like that. But the deck has not been kind of what people thought it would be. I know a lot of videos were made on Blaziken Zeraora. A lot of people thought Blaziken VMAX would be very, just good, and I was one of them, and I was pretty disappointed. Inteleon VMAX, the Fusion Strike one, was another deck that I think people thought would be really good, because in Japan it was performing very well. You have the Basculin, the energy makes sense. You have Cheryl, you have all your support cards. Everything makes sense for the deck to be good. Come here, all of a sudden it's been flopping. Jolteon claps it. Leafeon's been beating it. Mew's been beating it, and Mew should be one of your best matchups because you can out-heal their damage every time. It's just been a constant struggle for the deck to kind of rise into the limelight. I don't know what the problem is. Perhaps someone who is a better player than myself can diagnose that problem, but it fell flat on its face. So all 5 of these, in my opinion, are flops. You guys can feel free to disagree with me, but I think all 5 of these were a little bit of a disappointing watch as soon as they rose into the meta. So... and with that, I think the biggest loser is Rayquaza. I think Rayquaza had way too much hype around it. I think coming into Evolving Skies, everyone and their mom wanted to play Rayquaza, including myself. I really, really wanted to play Rayquaza. I really wanted this Max Burst card to be good. Azure Pulse seemed really good. No weakness on your Dragon type? That seemed nuts to think about. I was like, oh man, you don't even have weakness. How do you lose? And then I realized very quickly your damage output is so low. Your damage output is so low compared to the metagame. Even if you play Rose engines, even if you play Raihan engines, I don't know, you run out of resources so quickly, and Rayquaza just didn't do anything. I don't know. Besides Rayquaza, Blaziken's probably my other flop, but I think Rayquaza is the biggest loser this year, outright, straight up. Now, best single price deck. I'm sure I missed a couple single price decks. These were the first like 6. I think Catterday should be on this list too, but whatever. But I kind of like put what I thought kind of encompassed a little bit of the year. Salazzle Weeping Bell has been that status condition, twin energy, triple XL energy, and beam deck throughout the year. Malamar Rapid Strike has kind of put some of these big boys in check when you can high roll with whatever engine you're playing. It's a very self-sufficient deck, very easy to build, very cheap. Jump Left Spread was that fun deck that everyone tried for a week or two. I think it's still very good. It just kind of petered off as well due to it just needing a lot of resources turn after turn, like Raihan, or having that acceleration engine or whatever. The Dark Buck deck, they've been doing really, really good recently. Made by, I think, Ross Cawthon or Alex Cock. I don't remember. But this deck has really just been terrorizing Mews. But I think besides the Mew matchup, your other matchups are not great. So I don't know how to like evaluate that necessarily. And Mad Party was another single prize deck that kind of dominated the meta for a little bit. Using the, just basically like Night March strategy of doing a ton of damage very quickly. But as soon as we lost to Dene and as soon as we lost triple acceleration energy, the deck just kind of started falling flat on its face because you lost that gust, you lost that discard 15-20 cards a turn, you lost that ability to kind of dig deep, dig for those one-shots, and I don't know, Mad Party just disappeared as quickly as it showed up. And then Decidueye has always been a thorn in everybody's side. If you don't play it answer to walls, Decidueye will just beat you, but unfortunately a lot of decks play Inteleon now, and if you're good with the Inteleon engine, Decidueye becomes somewhat of a free matchup. So Decidueye has kind of also petered out. With that being said, I think the best single prize deck is the Malamar Rapid Strike deck. It has been constantly at the forefront of the meta in some capacity. It is like a tier 2, tier 3 deck, but you could like never count it out. It always finds a way into the meta and always finds a way to do well. And I feel like if this was IRL events going on right now, there would always be like 1 or 2 Malamars in day 2 that have the chance to top 8, that have the chance to go deep in the tournament, just because there's that inevitability of eventually, if they high roll you hard enough, the deck is just going to sweep you. And it's really scary because turn 2, turn 3, a lot of decks can't deal with getting one shot. Especially trading 3 prizes for 1. Like, it does not, the trade does not work well for a lot of decks. And if you don't play healing, the 2 shots will also add up very quickly. It just comes down to if they brick or not. But with the Brunos and the Octilleries and all that stuff, it's hard for them to brick. Now, most underrated strategies. I think these are strategies that across the year were really cool, and people didn't give too much thought into them. I put Chinchino engines up there because I think Chinchino engines, before Inteleon, while we had Jirachi, people were discounting Chinchino pretty aggressively. I think besides Tord, no one really cared about Chinchino because we had Dedenne, we had Jirachi, so the engines would all revolve around drawing a ton of cards, and even now Chinchino has kind of like fallen off into the wayside with Inteleon being there and just being better, strictly, I think. So I think that was a really cool strategy across the year, and I was hoping they'd do better. Control, Sander Warchick made a lot of really cool control lists, specifically using big VMAXs like Centiscorch, using Memory Capsule to discard the energy and continuously Cheryl looping. I think Control has always been a really cool archetype, and especially watching it thrive, not thrive, I guess, but like survive in a metagame where there isn't that many control cards anymore is really cool. The Jolteon plus Memory Capsule idea for a while to shut off Inteleon builds and stuff like that is also really cool, that I really liked for a little bit. And some people played Peony pre-Mew VMAX in like ADP, in other decks, and I thought that was a really cool strategy as well. Obviously, I think that they weren't as strong, like Peony plus Rose strategies or whatever, they weren't as strong until Mew, but they were really cool strategies to try. And I applauded them because you could Peony for like double saucer or something in Zacian and stuff like that, and you would just kind of get ahead of the game, and it was really crazy to deal with. And then Galarian Articuno V plus Rotom Phone. I think Flex Steady Righteous was the first to do this. Having that whole kit in your deck made it easy to thin, because thinning was a little bit difficult pre Fusion Strike. It still is a little bit. Like, you don't have that extra dig that you used to have with Dedenne, and there's situations where even if you're Crobat in your deck, you're drawing 1 or 2 at most a lot of the time. So having this Galarian Articuno plus Rotom Phone combo would make it really easy to just set your top deck, find that one card you needed, dig a little bit deeper, get exactly what you needed, and win the game. Now, with all that being said, I think Control wins. I think Control is just a really cool strategy. Looking at Sander do what he does, kind of put the works of art together, kind of put everything together is genuinely beautiful. It's genuinely beautiful to watch his ingenuity, his creativity. In every list he's put out, Zoroark Control recently, Centiscorch Control, like, these do not have traditional control cards, and he is finding a way to control lock you. Like, that's nuts. And I think that's just a testament to the archetype. So I think that's a very underrated strategy. Now, most impactful card on release, there's a lot of big hitters here, right? Like, there's your Rapid Strike Urshifu, there's your Houndoom, Victini, Shadow Rider, Ice Rider, Galarian Zapdos, Path to the Peak, Suicune, Jolteon, Mew, and Genesect. I put Galarian Zapdos because there was Pikarom and there was Eternatus upon release. So Zapdos really made a difference, as well as ADP and cards like that. So Zapdos really made a difference in early damage and how decks kind of structured themselves, like slotting in Zapdos and Auroras made itself very common. Rapid Strike Urshifu was just an insane card on release. Like, it did a ton of damage. I won a big major with it immediately on release. Houndoom was just nuts. It also did a ton of damage. Or like, it set up the board really well. It made Single Strike a viable strategy for like 3 days. Victini VMAX like basically terrorized the game on release. Like, you literally did not want to lose the flip to Victini, because all of a sudden turn 2, no matter what you're trying to set up, it's going to get blown up and you have no response realistically. So losing the flip to Victini was really scary. Shadow Rider and Ice Rider both obviously were very, very strong coming in. Path to the Peak also really started, hindering people on release. Suicune was a really good card on release, same with Jolteon. And Mew and Genesect were obviously like two of the best cards to come in with the Fusion Strike archetype. Now, with that being said, I give it to Genesect. I think that Mew can't function without Genesect, so I think Genesect has been the most impactful on release and has been really terrorizing the format since it came in. It has been the card. It has been people are playing Path, not because of Mew. People are playing Path to deal with Genesect. People are playing cards to deal with Genesect over and over again. And Genesect is really the workhorse of this deck. Now, I think honorable mentions do go to Rapid Strike Urshi and Shadow Rider Calyrex, because when Rapid Urshi came into the format, decks had to be built differently. Decks had to deal, like, that's when the Mewtwo inclusion started happening. When everyone started playing Mewtwo into their decks, everyone started playing Mew in their decks. Like, people were building their decks completely differently to deal with this big blue bear. And with Shadow Rider Calyrex coming in as well, people had to start dealing with that. So Dark type started slotting in because but that I think is an effect of the power creep, and that's why I don't give it to Mew. I give it to Genesect because I think Genesect is the workhorse. Now, I believe this is my last and final award, best Pokemon card type across the year. We've got ourselves the 10 types. I don't think I missed anything. It'd be really embarrassing if I missed a card type, because I think I googled this, and I really hope I didn't miss something. But across the year, we've had a lot of decks. I think every type has been represented in some capacity. Fire was Welder decks, Victini, etc. Grass, Mewtwo, Rillaboom, Delmise, etc. Water type, Suicune, Ice Rider, Calyrex. Lightning was Pikarom. Boltund stints here and there. Fighting was Urshifu, both Urshifus. Dark, you have your Dark Box variants right now. You have your Single Strike Umbreon. You have Gengar. Steel. Do we have a Steel deck? Oh, ADP. I think Zacian Zamazenta counts. I think Duraludon counts. I missed Dragon. It's okay. Dragon's not a real type anyway. We'll just... Okay. Psychic, we had Mewtwo, right? Rapid Strike Malamar. Mew VMAX. Normal, we didn't really... I guess Blissey is probably the only example of a normal type deck this year. And then I don't think Fairy actually existed. I think Fairy's already gone at this point. So I kind of forgot Dragon and I put Fairy in. This is really embarrassing. The answer is Psychic type. Psychic wins. I mean, obviously you can't discount the fact that Shadow Rider Calyrex existed, Mewtwo Tag Team existed, and Mew VMAX have existed all in the same calendar year. But all three of these decks were so overwhelmingly strong this year that it's hard not to give it to Psychic. Every other type has shown some flashes of brilliance throughout the year, but the fact that Psychic has held its like top 3 slot as a deck all year is nuts. Like, Mewtwo decks were top 3 in pre-rotation. Shadow Rider on release, top 3, maybe even number 1. Shadow Rider got bullied out. Oh, Dragapult even existed for a little bit. Dragapult was a top 3 deck. You come to Mew VMAX, it's number 1 BDIF. Like, you can't tell me this isn't the best type in general. Now, that being said, thank you guys so much for watching my awards. Let me know in the comments any disagreements you have, whatever. I mean, I'm sure I messed up something. I'm sure I'm wrong in some capacity. I'm not perfect. I'm just a guy, and these are my opinions. But thank you for watching, and 2022 is going to be absolutely banger. So hope you guys have a wonderful, fantastic year. Get all your goals in.